Right, on today's episode, we are joined by Mr. Joe Wirth. Joe, as I like to call him, is my version of, well, the American James Bond. He's extremely successful, and I'll go into why I call him the American James Bond. But welcome, Joe. What we're going to do today is dive into his successes, challenges, the failures, and linking it into the fitness side, his mindset, and just how and where he is today. Joe, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here, man. I'm excited.
Amazing. So let's just kick it off, mate. So tell everyone a bit kind of about yourself, what you do now here in Vegas, and how that journey became to kind of present day.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just try to hit the high notes here. Been married 23 years. That's not easy nowadays. Celebrity life, that's like 79 years or something. But yeah, married 23 years and got 4 amazing kids, 22 down to 12. Started a little bit younger, which has been an awesome blessing. Keeps me in shape because I want to do all the physical stuff with them. So that's a big motivator for me. But yeah, no, I mean, as far as just my story, I think a lot of people like to play up the it's just an average guy and didn't have any strengths or qualities or anything. But I genuinely believe that was true when it came to like school for me and testing. Just didn't really have anyone telling me that it was important or necessary, and kind of got by. So I've always, in my mind, been a little bit like behind the ball in terms of like figuring things out. But if there's something that I've done right, is I've always been a keen observer of the human scene, being able to like look and say, okay, that person there, they look like they've got something going right in their life. Maybe I'll go talk to them, or I'd take them out to lunch. I didn't have any problem doing that. I had a mom that sold makeup and had the pink Cadillac, and she was a saleswoman, and she always taught me, the worst thing that can happen is they say no. And I learned early that older people want to distill their wisdom and give that to you. So I was good at being like, okay, I didn't really have a mentor until I got married and had my father-in-law in my life, but I was good at looking around and trying to be like, hey, what should I do? What should I do? So I, got to college, graduated with a degree in marketing, and didn't realize it was kind of a bullcrap degree until I got to Vegas and looked around and went, I don't have much to offer, right? I don't have something that the market's asking for. I'd have to move to LA or New York, and here I am married with a kid on the way, and my back's against the wall, and in comes one of my mentors, right? And I would consider you a mentor, and like fitness. Here comes my kind of life and professional business mentor in the form of my father-in-law, somebody who's just been around and seen some mistakes that people made, and we went on a drive from Las Vegas to Utah, and it was about a 5-hour drive, and he had me, right? So he had a captive audience, and the timing was right, and the message was right, and he just said, hey, let's talk about your 5-year plan. And I was like, what the hell is what are you talking about? I can barely think past next week. And he said, let's talk about your 5-year plan. You're going to be somewhere in 5 years. It might as well be where you want to be, and probably need to make a plan. Otherwise, not going to happen, right? Just real simple things, and I'm kind of sitting there like an idiot, like, yeah, okay, And he did all this with his boys, who, of course, are a bunch of overachieving bastards, orthodontists and whatnot. But he was doing the same thing to me, and he was grooming me and helping me realize, like any good mentor, that change was possible, right? And he was inspiring me and making me realize, like, you have potential and there's a way to achieve it, but, you got to make a plan. So I come back to that story a lot, like just this conversation with my father-in-law, because it was, in life, most days are forgotten, and you have very few days where you're kind of like, okay, that was a massive turning point for me, and that was massive.
Mate, I can resonate with pretty much everything that you said. Especially with like kind of feeling like falling short and like playing. I kind of look at that and be like playing catch up a little bit, like looking and at what everyone else is doing, and essentially sometimes like comparing and be like, what are they doing to get to where they are, and like kind of what am I doing, and I'm stuck here. So it was like observing, but then having that voice that basically just put a plan in place, or make you think of putting a plan in place, but just simplifying it and taking all the the overwhelm, the overthinking, and the stress out of the equation. So you just literally put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And then, lo and behold, you start to see success.
Well, I remember I asked you, how did you get into this training thing? And you didn't hesitate. It was like, you kind of laughed that your friends, they already knew before you did, like, it was time for you to do that. And they're like, yeah, like, right. And that's what good friends will do. That's what good family will do, is they're going to see your potential before you do, and then lift you up and encourage you. But
yeah, like I was saying to you, not just Voice It Now is in lockdown. Started training friends with, again, minimal experience. And then I think we were all having a few beers, and I was like, do you think I'd be a decent personal trainer? And they were like, you're kind of stupid for not doing that already.
yeah.
So then that kind of sparked it. But going back to kind of what you do now, so you're in law.
Right. Yeah. So graduated with that degree that was worthless. And then back to that conversation, is he said, what about, he starts pitching me things. He basically, let's shoot big, right? Let's talk about this. Like, why not med school? And I just laughed. I was like, pretty sure that involves science and like things that requires smartness and brains and whatnot. And he challenged me, but I challenged him back and won, where he's like, okay, maybe you're not good enough for med school. I felt a little bit bad about that, but then he quickly went into what I think was his intention all the time. He's like, what about law school? No math, right? No science. Those things that you've told yourself you're not good at. I minored in English. I liked, just kind of talking and things that were more in that realm. I had a grandpa who went to Harvard and was a judge, and he was kind of like the one successful person in the family that we all kind of looked to, right? We didn't have a lot of it. I was the first to graduate of 7 kids, and my parents didn't go to college. So he was just kind of like, well, you had a grandpa that was smart, and I'm like, why not you? And then he said the stupidest thing, but for some reason it just helped me just shift my mindset, which was, he's like, well, you see these guys on the billboards, right? Glenn Lerner and these other guys, and you think they're any smarter than you? And I was like, I actually don't, at least based on their commercials and their ridiculousness. They seem like, complete morons. And but just such a simple thing, but like, you think that you really can't go to school and take the bar. And so he just planted that seed, inception, right? He planted that seed, which was incredibly powerful. Here I am today, and I've got a personal injury law firm with about 23 people and 5 attorneys, and we're in Arizona now, and it's doing amazing. And in that one conversation where somebody took the time to just say, hey, I see potential you don't see, or I know things, or I have secrets that you don't, and then being able to surrender the ego and just being like, maybe, right? And I see you as a trainer, doing that same thing, right, in the physical fitness arena, and he did that for me in like the professional area.
Yeah, mate, I love the fact, like that phrase, why not, or why not you?
Yeah.
I love that, and it's just questioning your beliefs, because more often than not, what you believe actually isn't true.
Right. Yeah, and it immediately broke down all of those fixed mindset things that I told myself, which was, just going to college and getting an undergraduate was enough, or going to be enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I don't have another 3 years in me, right? Like, it immediately shattered that. And so it's, it's good. And I've, ever since that conversation, I always appreciate it when people challenge me on something, and just kind of like in a way where it's just like, they mean well and they want you to grow, and you're just maybe have a blind spot you're not seeing.
That's one of the kind of things that me and my therapist, James Elliott, like dived deep into, was me always thinking I'm dumb.
Yeah.
Like, always. And he goes, you're actually super intelligent. Now, instantly, I'm turning around like, you just have to say that. And he goes, well, no, look at the facts. Look at where you are. Look at where you are and compared to where you've been and what you've done. So as soon as I started, and again, sometimes it'll creep into my mind like, oh, you don't understand it because you're thick, because you're this, because you're that. And that comes from like school and trying to be like the funny class clown to get away with not knowing something.
Oh yeah, I can relate to that a lot. Yeah. I think I was runner-up for class clown. Couldn't even get it, but.
And then, mate, actually yesterday I was making dinner and I put on a Modern Wisdom podcast.
I was going to mention him, by the way. He's going to be threatened by you pretty soon. Chris, yeah, he's going to be threatened.
Stop it. And this is where like I'm pushing more and more to be my authentic self, because him and the guest that I can't remember the name of were speaking for about 5 minutes, and I probably understood 3 words. The grammar that they were using, I haven't heard those words ever before.
You cut your dictionary.
So it was like, I might as well be listening to Mandarin, mate. So then I was like, right, well, that kind of gives me even more confidence in having conversations with people like yourself, and just in content, in everything. It's just simplify everything.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to make it, because if I try to sound more intelligent and things like that, it just doesn't suit me. So I'm still kind of like the class clown. I wouldn't ever class myself as like funny, but
well, it's so it's so trite, right? When people give you all the platitudes about just be yourself and, you know, don't try to be anybody else. It's like, well, it's really hard when you watch, you know, you listen to a Chris Williamson podcast, Modern Wisdom, and I've had moments where I listen to him and I'm pretty well read and, you know, like to, you know, I feel a lot of pride just having read a lot of books, and he'll mention books sometimes and I'm just like, oh shoot, like there's another one I have to write down that I don't know, right? But yeah, I think that's just normal. That's just human nature, right? And so getting back to kind of what I was saying about, you know, my father and then you being that mentor for people, you know, a lot of what I'm into right now is coaching young men. Like I'm 47 on Saturday. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you're not necessarily thinking about, you know, how can I start contributing more, but it does shift, and it should shift naturally, and I'm getting into more of this kind of coaching young men, and a lot of it just comes back to what we're talking about that applies in all areas of life, which is how to have a whole mindset and erase some of those fixed mindsets that you have. Like you're saying, I'm thick, I wasn't the best in school, I'll make up for it by being funny. You know, for the longest time, I would kind of in this self-deprecating, ha-ha way, you know, I'd almost say it like just because I was so insecure about the score I got on my ACT. That's kind of like what they use for college entrance. It was low. But, you know, it was kind of like just revealing your insecurities out front. I would tell everybody what I got, and I'm not a good test taker. And I adopted that, and that became part of who I was. Not a good test taker, and I had to fight through that all through law school. So I'm sure it's the same with this podcast and training and growing your business. I mean, I'm kind of curious, like, do you have any sort of hacks that you use right now, or that you've kind of like stumbled across recently that are effective in breaking through some of those fixed mindsets about what you're doing, because you're just starting to take off?
Yeah, I think it's obviously a lot of work with myself and my therapist and my mentor, and connecting with, honestly, like other coaches, and not being afraid to ask questions. I used to think in like school, at university, like asking questions was showcasing that you don't know.
Right.
Was showcasing that you are dumb. But it's, in my opinion now, showcasing your intrigue to learn. And the more you learn, the more successful, because you got more, like you're more educated. But then that filters through to you guys as clients and your results, and not just that, but like myself and my mental health and everything like that. But it's always challenging those thoughts that creep in. And instead of, like, for example, going on a run and just like, get it done, you fat piece.
Right, the negative,
the dark
defaulting
energy,
to negative.
that is still very motivational and does work. But I've started to change it and be like, you got this, keep going, you're nearly there. And the effect it's had is crazy, not just with fitness, but also with work. Because if you look at my Google Calendar, mate, I could get it up now. Like, you'll get a headache just from looking at it. But everything is specific. Everything's like kind of categorized. And whenever I feel overwhelmed, which is probably 3-4 times a week, I just focused on, right, okay, what do I need to do now? Not think of anything that I'm going to have to do in 2-3 hours' time. How can I make this next hour as beneficial, as productive as possible?
Which is just another way of saying staying present, right?
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of all this self-help stuff, I mean, that's the big truth it comes back to, right? Is just staying in this moment and not...
Yeah, and it's, for me, it's just like whenever I feel overwhelmed, my first thought was sometimes, like the old me would just close my laptop and then just escape that, but it's not actually working on it.
You'd run. Yeah.
I'd run.
Some way.
And now it's just like, right, how can I create that momentum again? Mm-hmm. Momentum with productivity, efficiency, all that stuff. And it could be a simple task as like cleaning the dishes, just having that little bit of productivity and then filter that through, whether that be training, making content, programming, whatever it is, and it's just starting small and then building. And that's the same as I coach, as you would know, just like start with the foundation, start with the basics, because one of my favorite quotes, God knows who said it, but you can't build a house and put the roof on first.
Right.
And for me, I keep just saying that over and over again, because without the foundations, nothing's going to stick.
Yeah.
Nothing. But with, just again going back, the marketing degree, now you've got a law firm in Vegas and Phoenix. There must have been challenges, setbacks, and failures where you've kind of, because in my opinion, no success story hasn't got an area where they was like seriously challenged, or they felt like, was this the right move? Like I've felt so many times that I wanted to quit coaching, whether it be through...
Really? Already? I mean, how long have you been doing it?
I've been PTing and online coaching for about 5 years.
Okay.
But it's all those questions of self-doubt and believing those limiting beliefs and being like, getting in my own head and being like, I don't think this is right. Life would be a lot easier if I just did a 9-to-5 job and went home and got a salary.
Right, yeah. It's not for the faint of heart.
Exactly. And when you're owning your own business, it is your identity. Like, we are walking business cards. Like, we are the business.
Yeah, you don't get to turn it off.
No. And it goes with you all the time. Like, wherever your phone goes, I suppose the more you scale, you can kind of delegate more.
Sure.
But as building something, you need to be on it, and it goes with you day and night. And it's so hard to switch off when you're with your wife watching TV. So many times my missus turned around to me and was like, you're not here.
Yeah.
Because I'm watching TV and like, I don't know, someone will die on TV, and I'm looking at it with literally no emotion.
Yeah, psychopath.
Because I'm thinking about what I need to do tomorrow and planning out my day in my head, and then I go to bed and I'm overthinking that, and then it's just that continuous kind of snowball effect of just building that stress to the point where it's just like, right, well, the only way to stop that stress is to quit. And then it's just like, right, actually, just sleep on it. And then the next day is completely different every single time.
Yeah.
But that's why I said to my mentor that I've been with, and he's amazing. He's like another therapist. Is
he a coach?
Yeah, he used to be my physique coach and started a mentorship. He's insane. And he put me onto my therapist and was like, because I just felt like I was at a brick wall with everything to do with business.
When was this?
This was June of last year. Even though I was seeing a lot of progress with my business, with my physique, with everything, I had that feeling like I knew there was more, but I didn't know how to get there. So I needed someone, I just needed someone to kind of, speak to, because in the first therapy session, I didn't realize the comments I received in school and all that stuff was affecting me as a 30-year-old man. And I was holding on to it without actually knowing. And then opening up that locker was like, the term I use is like opening up a window and then just getting slapped with fresh air. And then I cried after the first session because I didn't want to cry in front of him.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't know. But then I started crying and laughing. Then I burped and then sneezed. I was like, that's so weird.
You did it. You got them all out. You got them all out.
Yeah. I only need to fart, and then it would have been a full house.
A lot of things pent up. Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably the biggest change. And again, I'm talking about therapy a lot because I don't think a lot of men, especially, open up and talk about it. It's not a weakness. And basically, turning and have turned a weakness into one of my strengths, and being vulnerable, being authentic, and not being scared to show my personality.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had the benefit of I'm the youngest of 7. I have 5 sisters, so I was like the early adopter of therapy and the ones that I would be shamed and mocked by my guy friends, right? And of course now it's a lot more commonplace and it doesn't have the same stigma that it once had, which is good. I mean, it's going in the right direction, and I feel like it's almost all but gone away, that idea that men don't go to therapy and push down all your emotions. Like we all know that's actually the worst way to deal with, problems and stress and anxiety. So, I can honestly say that therapy, if it didn't save my marriage, it certainly got us back on track several times. I've had for about 2-3 years now a life business coach, and kind of, I'm sure, just like your mentor crosses over into wears different hats, and your therapist wears different hats, but she's been absolutely pivotal in me making massive changes to my business that are for the better. And so, I listened to one podcast a couple months ago, and at the end of it, some of them will ask, what's one bit of wisdom, or what would you want to share with the world? And he's like, this one's not going to be really popular because, most people are going to hear it and go, well, that's nice for you, Silicon billionaire. You can afford to pay anything you want, right? But he's like, if you can get a life coach, and even if it's just once a month, that investment is so worth it, whether it's $200 for an hour or $300. And I was just one of those little things that I wrote down in my mind, just, okay. Because I had my financial planner, he mentioned offhandedly that he had a life coach, and it kind of was like, okay, I'm starting to hear more of this. What's this all about? But really, it's just building your team, right? It's another member of your team, just like I brought you in on my fitness team. I'm 47 Saturday. I started my fitness journey at 40, and sometimes people ask me, or they're surprised when I tell them I have a trainer. What do you mean you have a trainer? And I'm like, well, it'd be awesome if he had enough free time to come to the gym every day. He's not that kind of trainer. He's an online trainer. And then, even my wife made fun of me. I've been meaning to tell you this. My wife mocks me. She's about to see the product, but she hasn't seen it yet. But she mocks me for paying to have somebody who just, sends me messages and kicks my butt through some videos as far as looking at my stats and whatnot. But even her, and as far as she's come in life, she's failing to see the benefit of that accountability and having somebody on my team who's going to just teach me new things, give me a different perspective. If you don't mind me going off on a little bit of a tangent here, I was hoping you'd ask about my double watch, cool, business on the left, fitness on the right kind of thing.
I'm here for it.
This is Tom's fault right here, the stupid fat Garmin. I get mocked incessantly at work for being the 2-watch guy. I don't want to sacrifice one for the other.
I know who to ask for the time now.
So, yeah, right. But but this is something that we've butt heads on, right? Where you're like, Joe, you got to track your steps. Finally, I get on board with that. I see the value. And then the last one that we finally broke through was just, last week, where it's like, Joe, I get that you've never gone more than a day tracking your food, but mate, I've got to have you track it. And there were bits of wisdom that you knew that when I did that, but I had to walk through the door. It's the whole matrix thing, right? I can show you the path, but you've got to walk it. But tracking my meals this last week on MyFitnessPal, and they make it about as easy as you can, but it still takes work and time and effort and intentionality. Wow, it's kind of blown me away. I was like, I had no idea that, I was consuming that many calories and my carb to protein to fats ratio. And so that was one of those things as I'm driving here that just kind of popped in my head where I'm like, it's just something that I've discovered, right? Is having mentors and paying for that and not seeing it as something that's, silly or unnecessary. It's basically just saying, I don't know everything and I never will know everything. So let me see if Tom, who I kind of, you have this energy and I've met you, and let me give this guy a chance and maybe I'll learn something from you. And of course I have. I've learned a ton.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. But just going back to your wife being skeptical and whatnot, I remember sitting my parents down and being like, I'm not going to do in-person training anymore.
they laughed at you?
My dad's always been in fitness. He goes, is this the right move?
Because that's not what trainers did back
in his day.
This
is, are you sure? Just going. And I was like, yeah. I was like, this is the move. And because they helped me with the first kind of investment, because again, I had nothing but.
Gave you 20 quid?
Yeah, a little bit.
High interest, yeah.
Close to that. But I remember because I was on another mentor before, and they were like, right, it was my first call, and they were like, you need to do this. Mate, I remember my fiance, girlfriend back then, now wife, messaging her because she was in Vegas and I was obviously in Manchester. Mate, I was I think I cried myself to sleep. I was like, this is too much. I've made the wrong decision.
Do you have the imposter syndrome?
Big time, mate. And I've honestly had that for the last kind of 2.5 years. Because you will always look at other coaches, the other coaches' content, they're following, everything like that, and just compare. But you're always putting that energy outward. And then what I started to do was turn it around and put it inward and be like, right, how can I improve? Instead of saying, like, what are they doing? And focusing so much on that. But again, like we said at the start, like observing other people and being like, oh, like, that looks good.
Yeah.
Or, do you know what I mean? And just soaking it in and being a sponge has helped massively. But just going back to kind of what, like the mentor and everything like that, I've got a coach, like a physique coach. And it's, yes, you get that other kind of brand of knowledge and education, which then you have forever and you can implement, and you can tell the kids, you can tell your missus, you can tell your mates, all that stuff. But for me, one of the main things is, and I know like kind of my education on fitness is like further advanced than yours, and rightly so. Because
how dare you?
I mean, I didn't want to say it, but
I told you I started at 40. Come on.
I'm not joking. But for me, it's mainly the weekly kind of reassurance, in the sense of, right, we're on the right track, let's focus on this. So it's basically, I think I use this term with Taylor, like when you put the, the barriers up on a bowling alley.
Yeah.
And they just, it doesn't matter how many times it's the barriers, it's always going to go that way.
Sure.
And you're always going to like hit a pin, or you're going to always score if you get the...
Might be one, might be
exactly.
a couple.
But it's always moving forward. And that reassurance for me, and it's not like, it's always like, you're doing amazing. It's like, this is going really well. Focus on this, and it's going to bring this up, and it's just a whole web of knowledge pushing you forward in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's, and again, me and Adam, who was on last week, we were like, I like the mindset of I know nothing. And that isn't the same as I'm dumb.
Right.
It's the same as like, I am an open book. Tell me everything.
Well, or another way, and sorry to cut you off, another way is just, a learner's mindset versus a non-learner, right? And, we've used the word mindset, we throw it around. I mean, for me personally, if there was one book that I were to recommend to you, and I probably already have, or to anyone watching or listening, is, Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, appropriately titled. And they talk about that because, when you're talking about growing up, not think you're smart enough, or, are you cut out for this entrepreneur or being a trainer life, right? And all the doubt creeps in inevitably, and all the, the disappointments and frustration. It's true. Like, we come into this world with a whole mindset of just like, hey, there's blocks in front of me. Let me see if I can build them or knock them down and learn. And then based on our family and our environment, people start to do the whole crab in the bucket thing and say, well, are you really going to be able to be a trainer and not meet people? And they fill your head with doubt, right? And so just recognizing like, okay, well, the story that I tell myself is what's going to power me through this, right? I can either choose to listen to my dad or my parents or my siblings, because usually those are the ones that are actually trying to bring you down the most, right? Keep you where they are, so they don't feel bad about their own, chasing their dreams kind of thing. But yeah, that's what you're speaking to, right? It's just a learner's mindset versus a non-learner's mindset, and then keeping it, right? It's like these athletes, some of them have an amazing career, and then the second they're done, it's steak dinners with their entourage until until he runs out of money, and you never hear from him again. Or it can be that kind of Steve Young thing where it's like he's enrolled in law school. As soon as he's done with his NFL career, he goes on to have a hedge fund worth, $8 billion plus, broadcaster on ESPN, all these things. And he's somebody that Carol Dweck talks about as he learned very early how to adopt that growth mindset in his life. And then you apply it to everything: relationships, fitness, business. And so that's just something that I always come back to and try to help with these young men I'm talking to, is just be really careful when you tell yourself, I can't, or I'm not, because, I always tell the story of my mom. First time I fell behind in math, right? Math is something that's like, it's steps. And if you can't just skip one of them and then go to the next one. So I'm sure you felt this way yourself in math, where at some point if you fall behind and feel too stupid to ask questions, oh, well, what am I going to tell myself? I'm an idiot or I'm not good at math. So I go tell my mom, I'm falling behind in math. And she meant well, but what she said, I immediately adopted as one of my fixed mindsets where she says, oh, don't worry, honey, Wirths don't do math. Wirth being my last name. So I guess our whole family just, we're just not a math family. Don't don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We're funny.
You don't need
we
it.
crack jokes.
Yeah.
That's more our thing, right? Class clowns. And I thought, cool. And I took that and I stored it. And I just thought, now I have a hall pass for the rest of my life to just not try in math. And I would tell people, I don't do math. And then pretty soon I adopted that with science because science was hard, right? And I wasn't naturally inclined to be good at it. So, but we do that. And if we pick them up, we have to learn or hopefully learn to get rid of them and drop them as you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. So just interested in, is anything hard that, like you say, like math, science, you kind of dropped or didn't put your full potential in, really?
Oh yeah, I had the story.
Would you say that was the same with fitness? Because you said that you didn't start till 40.
Oh, yeah.
Can of worms is opened. Let's have it.
Yeah. No, I'm shifting in my chair because there's a lot I could say on this, and I got to make sure I don't go off the rails here entirely. But no, this is another funny story. Have you heard of P90X?
It sounds like a golf club, mate. So
no, it's worse. Much worse. You'll hate it. P90X was this Tony, I think Horton was his name, and he's one of these guys that got popular he had an infomercial, and it was basically like, hey, buy my 20 CDs, 90 days, you're going to look like all of us beautiful models, doing these corn cob pull-ups and all this nonsense. And I was so stupid, Tom, I actually ordered the DVDs, which I don't do that, right? But every time the summer would roll around, what did I want? I was going to go to Newport Beach and didn't want to have, quite the dad bod that I had. And so I would get these P90X DVDs and work out, for 3 days, and then it was too hard. It's just, the whole thing was ridiculous. I was a sucker. And a lot of people were. And most people are going to know what P90X is and laugh because it was a big deal for a moment there in America. But my wife, who was ahead of me in her fitness journey, she would just laugh at me. She's like, you're an idiot. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? She's like, this isn't like a dip your foot in the pool thing or even 3 months, which, by the way, I never got to the 3-month mark. Shocker. She's like, this is for life. And I was like, well, that's terrifying. I don't want to work out for the rest of my life. That sounds like a lot of work. I might live till I'm 90. Hell with that. I don't want to do that. Right? It was too much. So I ran. And I'd brush off the P90X DVDs the next summer and lose a little bit of weight, but I always had that kind of I played basketball, but I didn't work out, and I told myself I'm not a weights guy, right? I didn't play football, I swam, and I did the softer sports, tennis, swimming. Told myself all these lies and these stories, but at a certain point, I begin to see, okay, I'm the definition of insanity. I keep doing the same damn thing, expecting a different result, working out for 2 weeks right before July, like I'm going to be shredded on the boardwalk, right? And so in my fitness journey, what it took for me, and it's going to come back again to you, I'm going to put the spotlight on you and why it's so important to have trainers and people on your team that know better or just keep you accountable is there's this chiropractor in town, and he played college football. He was in the NFL for a little bit, but I could show you some pictures, and he looks like Lou Ferrigno and the Hulk in some of them. I mean, it's ridiculous. He's just massive. And he mentioned kind of casually a couple times, if you want to come work out with me, you can. I ask people all the time, and they think I'm too big or they're intimidated. But I'm happy to work out with you. And I just kind of registered it. And I remember it, I listened to enough podcasts. I'd read enough books talking about the importance of a mentor to finally overcome obstacles. And sure enough, one day I just said, hey, do you mind if I take you up on that offer? And he's like, you serious? Because a lot of people have said that, and then they don't waste my time kind of a conversation, right? Listen, just don't waste my time. And I said no, and I just made one simple rule that changed my life, and now it's changed my kid's life and hopefully inspired others, is anytime he went to the gym, he would text me, and I would drop what I was doing and go. And it was usually at lunch. So I would just change in the car, get to Lifetime, all my dress clothes, my suits just crumpled up in the seat next to me, go work out, and then get back in all sweaty and then change into my suit again, do a little Superman switch over. And I did that for a year. And that's what was necessary for me to eliminate all those fixed mindsets of, I'm not a gym rat, I don't lift weights, I've got narrow shoulders, which, by the way, they're not as narrow as they used to be. But, genetically, I've got thin wrists, whatever it is, I tell myself all these things like, that's just not me. Even the things like, I'm not body obsessed, and I don't believe in body worship, and just like the classic, I don't want to get too big, Tom. I don't want to look like Arnold. That's gross. And you're like, don't worry, you won't, kind of a thing. So I worked through all of those fixed mindsets, and but the impetus was finally just being like, okay, anytime he goes, I'm going to go. And then guess what happens when I'm working out with him? He starts talking to me about food, and he starts teaching me terrible things, which at the time I thought were a lie but are true, where he's just like, food's not for fun, it's fuel. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's the best thing in the world. Like, no. He's like, no, you've got to change your relationship with food, right? So all of a sudden, I'm getting all these nuggets of wisdom, and I'm learning from somebody who's been working out since he's 15. And so then I've crossed over, and now I'm the guy that can't relate to anybody that doesn't work out every day, that wouldn't want to look and feel their best. I try not to be obnoxious about it, but it's just something that I get passionate about, because I had 40 years of just kind of living in that space of like, oh, I'm going to work out and look good in the summer, I'm going to do this. And it took getting a mentor. And then since that, I've had different trainers. I tried another online trainer, and I learned some stuff, and then you pick them up and you can set them down and it's fine. But, with you and what we're doing right now, it's just amazing, because there's always another level, right? There's always somewhere more you can go with your clients.
Yeah, no, I love that and appreciate that. And one thing, just to piggyback on that, is like, there's another level and somewhere else you can go, is when you first joined, it was physique. It was like, I want a bigger, well, don't get me wrong, like, I think for every guy, it's always like, I want a bigger chest, bigger arms, and
that's
I want to
exactly
improve that, right? But then, and linking into why I call you the American James Bond, is that you do so many, like you've just come back off a heliboarding trip, you do so much with the kids and all this stuff. So you've got a very adventurous, active lifestyle. And when was it, like, must be like 6-7 months ago now, you were going on this heliboarding trip, and you were kind of worried, or
that's a good word. Right word. That's fair. No, terrified. Maybe terrified.
And so you wanted to put in more work in building up your quads, your glutes, your lower body strength. So that's what we did.
The non-vanity stuff, yeah. No one's ever complimented me on my glutes, by the way.
Mate,
I'm still waiting.
Tangent, one of my old one-to-one clients used to call me long back, because I've got no arse. Anyway, so then we put more volume into the lower body stuff, like unilateral stuff, and like a little bit of plyometrics, holding, like increasing time and attention, like these little things, again, developing your knowledge and education. And then you turn around, it was after the heliboarding, like, legs felt good. Obviously, they're going to be fatigued from what you did.
I was surprised, actually, yeah.
Yeah, so that's another thing with, like, what I love is, yes, when people sign up, it's like, it's usually the visual side of things, like, I want to drop 20 pounds, I want to achieve this. But the further you move that goal along, the goals change.
Okay.
And then it will link into kind of, for example, what you just come back off a heliboarding trip, and you knew that essentially, like, your lower body was holding you back a little bit, and it was a worry. So then we took the worry out of the equation and started pushing more volume through the lower body to build up that strength, and obviously the endurance to facilitate heliboarding. And it wasn't just one day, it was three days
yeah,
of relentless snowboarding.
I'm sitting here like a Jack Russell Terrier, like trying not to like jump over you, be a good guest, because I can't believe I neglected that part of it, because you're right. I was solely focused on, I want to look good, right? And it was just all the vanity ego stuff. And so, again, something I learned from a book or a podcast, who knows, was, it's probably Simon Sinek. Start with why. Something that along those lines, where I was like, okay, they're like, write out every single reason that you want to be in shape and should be in shape, and fitness should be a priority in your life. And so I got out my notes, and I still have it on my phone, and I could read it to you. And I've done this with my kids and people who are ready to hear it. And I said, here's my why. And that also was the thing that changed. That was another impetus where it was just like launched me and shattered all this fixed mindset I had in the fitness world about I'm not this, I can't do that, I can't work out for the rest of my life. Was just identifying all my why. And what surprised me about that list, it was like 10 or 11 things. I could have sworn, because up until that time, that looking good and having that men's health physique and the fake abs that are, now I know all the tricks, right? But, was the goal. And that was like 6th or 7th, right? At the top of it was, I think, I want to be able to participate and play in all these sports and enjoy everything with my kids, right? And I wanted to be an example to them. And that kind of surprised me. And then the next thing down, I think, was to stay out of the hospital and avoid unnecessary surgeries and all that nonsense, and then I keep going and, understanding, like, I want my mental health to be better. And I know that so I listed all these things that were like kind of lingering in my subconscious that I knew, but getting them down on paper, right? They would say, put pen to paper. I put pen to paper. And it was this, I probably could have just kept going forever. And then I realized there is simply no good reason not to exercise at least an hour every single day, right? Or 30 minutes. But to have that physical activity, there's just no good reason, right? Especially with what we know now about how it helps you with your mental health. So finding my why, finding a mentor, those things converging at the right time. Now I'm that annoying person that's just like, bro, you don't lift, you don't work out. And it's just like, but I can speak the language of, but I also know how you are and know, because even when I started working out, I told my wife, like, I feel amazing. I'm going to do this till I'm 50. And she's like, seriously, we're still doing this? And I'm like 60. And she's like, keep going. I'm like, oh, right, that's right. It's for life, right? And you do, I'm sure you see that with your patients, or not your patients, but your clients, as you were just saying. Like, they come into it wanting to look a certain way.
Yeah, and I like that. And I think we all, to an extent, want to look a certain way, because that's where confidence comes in. But what kind of for example, labeling a fat loss phase, it's not just a fat loss phase. What you're actually going to do and develop and kind of learn and improve is everything, education around nutrition, how to structure your days, mental health. Like, there's so much within getting in shape. And there's no, for me, like, on every call I have, it's like, I don't do quick fixes. If you want a 6-week summer shred, Google it.
P90X, you mean?
Yeah, that.
90 days.
Again, it still sounds like a tailor-made driver, mate. I'm not going to lie. But
the X is extreme, by the way. It was extreme.
But just linking back into that, it's like, I didn't really get into fitness until I came off kind of cruise ships and going into COVID, and when that conversation about being a personal trainer with my friends. Because I remember going on my first cruise ship, and everyone was like in shape, and cruise ship. I used to work on cruise ships.
They were in shape?
Yeah, like the dancers, the sports teams.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say the guests. I'm like, I don't know about that.
Oh no, they definitely weren't. And I've always played sport beforehand, so I was like kind of fit, but visually I was so unconfident, and like going to beaches I actually just wouldn't go.
Yeah, keep the shirt on. And
then it was just like kind of, right, sweet, how do I just lose fat? How do I just get skinny? Like, I was just like skinny. So I just did cardio, ate next to nothing. And then through all those failures and everything, that's what I've got in my kind of catalogue in my locker to then share with you guys and be like, right, if you want to lose 20 pounds and have a physique at the end of it, we need to do resistance training. We need to do weight training. Otherwise, you're going to end up like skinny fat or like a deflated balloon or all these things. Yeah. So it was going through those kind of moments. And again, it's only when looking back, and I'll be on like doing a check-in with you, and it will just come in and I could be like, oh, my experience from this was this. Like, going back to, you were saying tracking for a week, and before that you were like, oh, I have, and it was all healthy stuff, like a handful of pumpkin seeds or something like that. I remember in lockdown with one of my best mates, like, again, I thought peanut butter was like just a protein hack. It is
so calorie dense.
Mate, we would have that with everything. And I was like, now I'm like, oh, you're so stupid.
Dude, great for bulking, yeah.
And we weren't bulking.
That's the only problem.
Yeah. so it's those kind of things where just like, again, the education of me turning around to you and be like, even if your snacks are healthy, you won't see the drop in scale weight. You won't see the changes in your physique because we can still gain fat, gain weight from eating healthy.
And it's a tiny thing. Like, I don't know, I'm sure, I think it's been the #1 book on Amazon for years, Atomic Habits, right? James Clear. So even you give me that tiny little, like, hey, here's a little blind spot. You're not seeing this right. I reach into the seed or grab a handful of pumpkin seeds and now I kind of just make it a little smaller, right? But it's the Atomic Habits where it's just like you move that needle ever so slightly. Like I do that for a year or two. Like it's going to make a difference. So, and that's not something I would ever do. I would just think, oh, I'm eating nuts, I'm eating seeds. It's great.
Yeah, it's not
small. It's tiny, but it's just not appreciated until.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I say to, because obviously we're going through photo shoot prep at the minute, but what kind of the advice I get with, because everyone's at different stages with their fitness, their physiques and everything like that, but with people that join the team or have achieved a lean physique, those tiny decisions are huge when you put them together. For someone that wants to drop 50 pounds and they have a handful of pumpkin seeds, is that going to affect anything too much? No. But going into a process and going through a process like we are into photo shoot, all those little decisions, or having like an extra 2 squares of dark chocolate like per day or 4 times a week, those little decisions matter.
Yeah.
And it's just focusing on those 1%. And again, this is what kind of I push on to everyone, is developing that athlete mindset, like thinking, breathing, talking, acting like an athlete, changing that persona slightly. It should be like, right, is this going to, again, it's asking you to ask yourself those questions. Is this going to fuel performance? Is this going to affect sleep? Like, do I need those 2 beers to relax? No. Like all these little questions, and just, again, all it's doing is redirecting you to where you want to be. And that's everything that I do, is be like, right, what do you want to achieve? Sweet, you tell me. And then everything that I say to you is directing you into achieving said goal.
Well, so much of I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes as a trainer. I mean, one thing we know is we have all the information. We have all the answers, right? Gone are the days where, they would try to keep the Bible away from the lay people and all the secret. I mean, it's all the answers are there for us. So now I feel like the life skill that everyone has to learn, if they haven't already, is applying that wisdom, right? And so we know the answers. We all know, and then it gets repeated so much that it just becomes, noise. Is, we all know what we're supposed to do to be in shape, right? Yet I don't think the numbers are trending in the right direction still, right? I mean, I go to the gym, and that's the minority. You go to Disneyland, and you're just like, okay, it's a crisis, it's a problem. So having people like you, just like with mental health, we need more of it, because it's overwhelming. Having all the answers and information, I think, in a lot of ways is just crippling. And so we need people like you to talk about your experience and say, listen, I've been there. I know what you're going through. And by the way, here, let me just show you that change is possible. Help you kind of see your potential that you don't probably see right now, but just, being part of that environment where people can then start to go, oh, you know what? I can do this. And also I'm going to, because you're holding them to be accountable.
Yeah, just on that though, I do agree, but also disagree, in the sense that I do agree that all the information's out there, and if anyone wants to get in shape, then they can access everything. But then I also disagree with that, because yes, all the information's out there. You can learn about, and let's obviously with health and fitness, all that information's out there, but it's not specific to you, and it's not specific to your lifestyle, having a family, having a wife, running your own successful business. You can Google or put into AI, give me a 6-week training program that builds this. But it doesn't take into account your likes, dislikes with food, equipment, and all this stuff. So this is where the personalization is a massive thing for me.
Well, and you did that with, going back to what you said about I set this trip for going heliboarding in Canada, and I was terrified, way out of my skill level for snowboarding, and knew it would push me, but I'm not sure I would have been able to do it without you, because you did a good job of pulling that out of me and saying, what are your goals? And then, okay, now I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, you know what? I really have neglected some of these muscles that aren't the vanity muscles, and I want to be able to do the full 3 days and not be the guy that sits on the helicopter and wastes all this money just because it sounded cool, but actually get the most out of the experience. And you helping me with that, and I'm just going to speak, just give you a little bit of a shout out. It's already inspired my kids and my daughter, who snowboards but not great. She told me that she, because I'm like, I would love to do this with each one of my kids. I've got 3 boys and a girl. And she's like, yeah, don't leave me out. Like, I want, and so it's cool when you get that specific in what you do. And like you're saying, when even though the answers are all out there, having somebody that like you come in, what are your personal goals? You're changing bloodlines. Like, I've got now a whole family that are going to go on, and then their kids are going to be healthy. So it's really cool.
No, yeah, that's huge. But just linking into kind of obviously changing the training up and again pushing it back into how you're educating the younger generation now, is everything that I do like, well, to be fair, one thing that I love about you, because there's many.
Yeah, can we talk about that? How deep into this are we? Like, I was waiting.
Is you always ask questions. You always like, why? What's this working? And that develops your education, and it gives everything more meaning and more purpose. So education for me, obviously, is a huge thing. Like, if I told you to do something but didn't explain or couldn't explain why you're doing it and the reason for doing it, it confuses me in how that would seem.
Yeah.
So why do you think education for you personally is such a big thing for you now, with like you mentioned with the young generation?
Well, okay, great question. And, I'm surprised we haven't talked about it yet. I mean, the one thing that I haven't mentioned too, as far as if, it's a horrible thing to ever have to answer, because you never want to see yourself as being successful. But, to the extent that I've enjoyed some success in my life, certainly didn't have any advantages educationally, public schools, whatnot, and nobody went to college in my family. But it was just, fortunately, I liked reading, and I read books when I was a kid. Not like a voracious reader or anything like that, but even in my late teens and early 20s, when you're just trying to figure out your place in the world and how am I going to actually make a living and provide, I wasn't afraid to pick up like a self-help book, and I remember one back in the day was titled "What to Say When You Talk to Yourself," which really, there's probably at least a handful right now that are in the top 30. But that's all what it comes back to is, the story we tell ourselves, our personal narratives, the tracks that we lay down each day of when we wake up, and do we go default negative and stay there, or do we get back on track? So, I started reading those books where other people might be like, seriously, Tony Robbins, like that clown, and I wasn't embarrassed to, because I was learning things from them, and I was trying to find my mentors. I didn't have any. My father wasn't that for me. He kind of raised himself as an orphan, and so he didn't have that skill set. So I had to look for it, and I found it in books, and it wasn't until, and so I would read persistently, and that would take me down another rabbit hole, and then I would read about the brain and neuroscience, and that would take me down something, and I didn't realize it was a superpower until I was about 35, and I was introduced to Ryan Holiday, right? And so Ryan Holiday basically hijacked, stoicism in a positive way and brought it to the world. And he's got these books, Ego is the Enemy, and, he's got all these best-selling books where it's essentially stoicism, right? But what kind of my big aha moment and realizing I wasn't crazy for kind of always thinking I had a process of getting ahead in life was Ryan Holiday wrote this article about reading, and that's his focus. He's got a bookstore down in Austin. He's somebody that will, I always get the books that he's reading in a synopsis, but he had this kind of dissertation, and it was longer. It was like 10 or 15 pages or something, but he basically went through and said, kind of called you out. Like, reading is an obligation. We have a duty. These people have taken all of their life secrets and taken the time to write it down, which is not an easy thing to do. I'm trying to write a book and finish it, and it's like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And he's like, so to lay those things at rest and think, well, oh, no, better, or I'm just going to ignore it. And he was just basically saying that was his secret. He was running the marketing for American Apparel, and he became he helped research for Robert Greene's book, The 48 Laws of Power. And but his superpower was reading books and finding answers and knowing that he could find the answers in these books. And so that would also be one of those things that when I'm talking to young men and trying to coach them or anybody or a friend is, reading an actual physical book. We all know we should. How many people do you know do it? But the Chris Williamsons, the Tim Ferrisses, all these people that you kind of look up to and they've got it together in all areas, not like holistically they have it together, right? It's not just they're really, really in shape, but they're idiots. Like, no, like the Jockos and stuff, they read and they post their top 100 books, right? There's a reason for that. And so I came across Ryan Holiday and he talked about that. It was the first time I kind of realized, like, not in a cocky way, but just like, oh, this is also how I've gotten ahead, is I've been willing to read these books. And I've even had a couple friends who would make fun of me or tease me, like just, not anything mean, but, I was always reading those books that fall into that social science category or self-help kind of woo-woo. And then as they've kind of seen me and we've grown up together, they've kind of had to be like, okay, I'm going to stop making fun of you, and what book should I read, And hopefully you're reading, and it's not just on the phone, because there's a difference, right? Underlining, writing in the margins, and Ryan Holiday does a really good job of, kind of telling you how you should read. And there's even a book, How to Read a Book, that he recommends, and I read that, and my kids would see it and laugh, like, seriously, Dad, you're reading a book called How to Read a Book? And I was like, I know, your dad's an idiot, but you got a pretty good life, so.
Yeah, for me, like, I've always been a slow learner, and like reading a book, all the words and letters would just mix up. So what I do now is have a highlighter.
Yeah.
And just read a chapter and be like, right, what really stuck out to me, and then really, really soak it in. And reading a book, for some people, might take 2-3 days. For me, it'll take like 4 to 6 weeks.
All right.
But
oh, I thought you said 4 to 6 days.
No, like
4 to 6 months.
But it will all the information will be like soaked in.
Yeah.
Because
it's just a different. Yeah, you
sometimes I just read a book. Like the first book I read, I was like, I'm going to read my first book, and I read my first book when I was 22.
Yeah, well, David Goggins talks about that, right? And we can all relate. You read a line, oh shoot, space. Mine went here. Read it again, and that's how he got through all of his different trainings. Was he just like, I'm not going to quit. Like, I'm going to read this until I understand it, even if that means I have to start over 17, 18, 19 times. So. Yeah. Yeah, but don't worry about the fact that it takes you longer. I mean, it's just most people, it's like fitness. We know we should work out, but we don't. Like reading, I mean, it's something that
it's a hack.
Well, and you just gotta do it. It's one of those things where it's like you pay your dues, and so reading all those books positioned me to be able to, once I was 40, to actually start to giving some of the secrets away and the advice and stuff. That. And you see the patterns, right?
Yeah,
you see it's like,
absolutely. So. And you're combining that education with all your life lessons as well, which is essential.
Yeah.
Mate, I've absolutely loved this, and we could be, honestly, on here. We could get lunch, a few coffees.
It's cliche, but I would love to continue the conversation, but thank you for having me on, and honestly, thank you.
Yeah, no.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say, we'll definitely get you back on again, because I feel like we're just scratching the surface with everything. But no, I appreciate you, mate. And if people were to find you, where and how could they find you?
I'm just all over the web. No, I don't.
I am everywhere.
Yeah, I've got a firm website, blackburnworth.com. Hopefully you don't need me. It's that whole, basically your worst day. If you get in a bad car accident or something, give me a call. But otherwise, Instagram, JJ Wirth. I like to at least post some of the adventures and Kilimanjaro and the heliboarding and stuff. And and otherwise you'll find me at Lifetime or
on my Instagram.
Yeah. So no, thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure. Thanks, mate.